I had worked for US Customs and Border Protection, CBP, for 5 years. Because my extraordinary sense of smell was a classified asset, Julian always believed I was just a boring, low-level desk clerk. On our third wedding anniversary, I saw my husband at the airport arrivals gate, the same husband who had texted me saying he had to work late. He was gently tucking a strand of hair behind his ex-girlfriend Bianca's ear, smiling with a tenderness he hadn't shown me in years. When he noticed me, he dropped his hand as if nothing had happened, instinctively shielding Bianca behind his back. "Elena, are you tracking me? It's just an anniversary. Would it kill you to spend one night alone? Just say it. What do you want this time to shut up? A designer bag? Shoes? Or is it jewelry?" The surrounding travelers threw disdainful glances at me. It felt like a public slap to my face. I pushed the ultrasound report back into my coat pocket and clenched my trembling fists. "I didn't track you, Julian." Bianca spoke up, her voice sweet and dripping with pity. "Thanks for picking me up, but your wife is more important. Go home and keep her company. And don't be so harsh on her. Apologize." Julian gave me a dry, forced shrug. "Sorry." I stared at him, my heart sinking. When had the arrogant Julian Cole ever been this obedient to anyone? Bianca patted his shoulder, took her suitcase, and headed toward the customs gate. Suddenly, a strange, toxic odor wafted into my nose. I stepped forward and blocked her path. "Excuse me. Please open your suitcase. CBP inspection." Bianca froze, looking utterly bewildered. Before she could speak, Julian sneered. "Elena, you're taking this drama way too far. Who do you think you are to stop Bianca?" "Julian, your wife seems really mad this time." Bianca smiled bitterly, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the handle of her suitcase. Julian stormed over, grabbed my wrist violently, and dragged me back. "Elena, you're a basic office clerk. Where do you get the nerve to pretend to be a CBP officer?" Bianca lowered her eyes, acting helpless. "Julian, forget it. She's probably just too insecure." "Insecure?" Julian scoffed. "She's just petty and jealous." He glared at me, his veins popping as he suppressed his rage. "Do you even know where Bianca came from? She just flew back from an active epidemic zone. She was out there saving lives in a war-torn country, and what about you? All you care about is discounted purses and spying on me. You are mediocre and selfish. You don't even compare to a single hair on her head." Every word he spat was laced with poison, stabbing straight into my chest. But the concentration of the toxic odor was rising. If this suitcase passed the exit and entered the public area, the consequences would be catastrophic. Seeing that I wouldn't budge, Bianca bit her lower lip. She suddenly gasped and collapsed softly into Julian's arms. "Julian, my hand hurts so much. I think the old injury from the hot zone is acting up." Julian immediately let go of my wrist to hold her tight. His face was filled with sheer panic and worry. "Bianca, are you okay? Do we need to go to the ER?" He turned to me, his eyes filled with murderous rage. "Elena, if anything happens to her, I will make you pay." "MS. Sterling," I said, ignoring his anger. "Please cooperate and open the suitcase." "Why the hell should she cooperate with you?" Julian stood up, blocking Bianca, looking down at me with pure disgust. "You're in plain clothes, you have no badge and no warrant. What right do you have?" He was right. Today was my day off. I wasn't in uniform, and my ID was locked in the office safe. Seeing my silence, Julian sneered. "Elena, you always do this. You make a scene, and when things get out of hand, you play the victim." The crowd of onlookers grew larger, their whispers echoing like a tide. "Is that woman crazy? What does another person's suitcase have to do with her? She probably lost her mind because her husband's ex-girlfriend came back." Bianca stood up, gently patting Julian's arm. "Don't be mad. Elena is just acting out of jealousy. How about I just open it for her?" Her tone was so graceful and reasonable, making me look like a hysterical shrew. Julian's eyes softened even more. "You don't have to tolerate her." Bianca shook her head with a smile, her fingers reaching for the suitcase's combination lock. But I noticed that while she was spinning the dial, her thumb quickly pressed a small hidden button on the side of the lid. She was releasing something inside. My pupils dilated. I lunged forward and slammed my hand over hers. "Don't touch it." Julian completely snapped. He shoved me hard. I stumbled backward and crashed violently against the metal barricade. A sharp, stabbing pain exploded in my lower abdomen. I doubled over, clutching my stomach as cold sweat instantly drenched my back. Julian didn't even look at me. He put his arm around Bianca's shoulder, picked up the suitcase, and walked toward the exit. "Julian, stop right there." He paused, looking back with an impatient, cold sneer. "Elena, what else do you want? Do you want me to say it in front of everyone? Fine. I regret marrying you. Is that enough? I've regretted it for 3 years." He said those words in a calm, flat voice in front of the entire terminal. I took a step back, unable to believe this was the same man who, 3 years ago, had stood up against his own father just to protect me. On our wedding night, he had handed me his cards and vowed in front of my late mother's photo. He had promised to love and protect me forever. Now, everything had changed. Bianca held Julian's arm, her eyes cast down, but a faint, triumphant smile played on her lips. I had seen that exact smile in the old photos Julian kept hidden in his desk. "Sir." An airport security guard ran over, breathing heavily. "We received a complaint that someone is causing a scene and blocking passengers." Julian immediately pointed at me. "My wife. She's mentally unstable. She saw me talking to a friend and lost her mind." "Ma'am, please do not obstruct other passengers," the guard said, turning to me. I forced myself to stand straight despite the agonizing pain, my palms soaked in cold sweat. "I have probable cause to believe that suitcase contains biohazardous contraband. Please assist me in detaining her." The guard frowned. "Do you have credentials?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Julian mocked from the side. "She's a basic desk clerk earning minimum wage. What credentials could she possibly have?" Bianca spoke up at the perfect moment, her voice sweet and harmless. "I'm a member of Doctors Without Borders. I just returned from West Africa. This suitcase only contains my personal belongings and medical journals. This lady must have misunderstood." She pulled out an ID card from her purse and handed it to the guard. The guard took a look, and his expression instantly relaxed. "Since you have official credentials, ma'am, please step aside." "The ID is fake," I said. The terminal fell dead silent for a second, followed by even louder laughter from the crowd. "Oh, now she claims it's fake. Why don't you show us a real one then?" Is this woman so jealous she's losing her mind? Her husband literally said she's crazy. Poor guy, marrying a psychopath. Julian's face turned completely black. He strode over to me, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. "Bianca and I are clean. Stop your disgusting accusations. Elena, leave with me right now, and I might give you one last chance." I didn't budge. "You're not leaving?" He grabbed my arm, trying to drag me away. "Julian, don't touch me. I'm pregnant." Playing this card again? His voice was filled with sheer disgust. "Last time we had a fight over my student, you faked a migraine to go to the hospital. Now you're pregnant? If you were really pregnant, you'd be resting at home instead of throwing a tantrum at the airport." Bianca stood nearby, one hand on the suitcase handle, her other hand searching for something inside her purse. The suitcase was about to pass the security gate. I ignored Julian, pushed past him, and rushed toward the wall 3 meters away. There was a red button under a protective plastic cover with a label that read, "Level 1 Biohazard Alert." I flipped the cover open and slammed my palm down. An ear-splitting alarm instantly blared through the entire terminal. Red warning lights flashed frantically. The noisy crowd silenced for a few seconds before erupting into a massive panic.
Bianca froze.
Her hand stopped inside her purse, her fingers trembling. Julian, seeing that I had actually triggered the alarm, rushed over in a fury. He raised his hand high, the wind from his palm brushing my face. He looked ready to slap me, but his hand stopped in midair. Not because he spared me, but because everyone was watching. As a self-righteous university professor, his reputation couldn't afford the scandal of hitting a woman in public. Instead, he poked my forehead hard, pushing my head back. "Do you know what the penalty for a false alarm is?"
Jail. Fines.
"You don't care about your reputation, but I care about mine. You're just a clerk. What right do you have to press that button? Do you even know what it means?"
He really didn't know.
He had never cared about my job, nor had he ever asked what I actually did. Every time I worked overtime, he would only say, "What's so busy about a trash job?" For 3 years, in his eyes, I was just a useless, dependent ornament he had to support. "Make way. Clear the area." A hazmat team in full protective gear rushed out from the side corridor, pushing a sealed containment cart. The security captain ran at the front, his radio buzzing. "Level 1 triggered in Zone A3. No visible leak. Requesting immediate backup." Bianca stood stiffly by the gate, her suitcase locked behind the emergency barrier. Her panic lasted less than a second before she regained her composure. She even offered a warm, polite smile to the hazmat team. "Officer, I am a registered physician with the International Red Cross. This woman is having a domestic dispute with her husband." She falsely triggered the alarm just to harass me. The supervisor looked at her documents, then at me. Pale, in plain clothes, and looking exhausted. He was clearly swayed by her credentials. He turned to me with a stern face. "Ma'am, this is a federal customs area, not a place for you to settle your marriage problems." Julian turned to the hazmat captain, put on his elegant professor persona, and apologized. "Officer, I am so sorry. My wife has been emotionally unstable lately. She probably did this because we had a fight. We are incredibly sorry for the trouble. This is all just a big misunderstanding. This woman is out of her mind. She literally claimed someone was carrying a bioweapon. Now we're all stuck here. I feel so bad for the doctor. She went abroad to save lives, only to come back and deal with this psycho. If I were him, I would have divorced her a long time ago. She deserves a good beating. Listening to their words, my nails dug deep into my palms. The hazmat team was following protocol, but they needed my federal ID number to bypass standard procedures and initiate a forced search. But my phone had been smashed when Julian pushed me earlier. Without my phone, I couldn't reach my supervisor. Without my ID, the hazmat team wouldn't authorize the search. Julian stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. If you kneel down right now, apologize to Bianca, and admit you did this just to get my attention, I might consider using my status as a professor to bail you out of the police station. Kneel down. Apologize to Bianca. I looked at the face of the man I had loved for 3 years, and for the first time, he felt like an utter stranger. Julian. My voice was quiet but steady. I gave you your last chance to walk away from her. Are you threatening me? He scoffed, his eyes filled with contempt. It's not a threat. I looked straight into his eyes. From this moment on, you will bear the full legal consequences of your choices. Hearing this, Bianca's eyes flashed with impatience. With a click, she spun the dial, unlocked the suitcase, and flung it open in front of everyone. Since you want to see it so badly, look. Everyone, please be my witness. If they don't find any contraband, I will make sure she rots in jail. Bianca's suitcase lay open on the clean tiled floor. Inside, there were only a few ordinary clothes. In the corner, there were a few designer makeup cases and a thick stack of handwritten medical notes in English. The crowd burst into laughter. That's it? A biohazard? She really is insane. What a drama queen. It's just normal luggage, and she tried to frame her. How vicious. This crazy woman should be locked up. Julian, eager to end this and leave with Bianca, turned to the airport security. Don't waste your time. Just take her away. My wife is sick. She has a hereditary mental illness. He pointed at his head, his face filled with disgust. Those words were like a rusted dagger plunging straight into my heart. Years ago, when my father cheated on my mother, he had publicly accused her of being mentally ill. He drove my mother to despair, leading her to jump from the 18th floor of our apartment building. That was the deepest, bleeding wound in my heart. Julian knew everything. Yet, to protect his ex-girlfriend, he didn't hesitate to stab me right where it hurt the most. Look at you, hysterical and pathetic. How are you any different from your mother, who jumped off that building? Equally crazy, equally unreasonable. The whispers around us changed. The mockery turned into fear. Several bystanders stepped back, as if afraid I would suddenly lose my mind and attack them. A mother pulled her child behind her. Where are the guards? Get her out of here before she hurts someone. The security guards exchanged glances and began to surround me. I am not crazy. And my mother wasn't either. I whispered, my voice trembling, but I forced every word out clearly. But no one listened. Someone shoved me roughly, trying to drag me away. Get her out of here. Stop her from ruining the airport. In the chaos, I was pushed to the cold floor. A warm, thick liquid began to trickle down my inner thighs. I grabbed Julian's pant leg, my voice shaking with terror. Julian, I'm really pregnant. Please. Julian didn't bend down to help me. Instead, he kicked my hand away with disgust. Elena, even if you are pregnant, he paused, his lips curling into a cruel sneer. I wouldn't want this child anyway. Who knows what ticking time bomb is buried in your family's genes? I don't want to raise a kid who's destined to jump off a building. Let's go, Bianca.
You just got back.
Let me take you out for a nice dinner. Where do you want to go? People were laughing. Some were filming with their phones. I lay on the freezing floor, feeling my life slowly draining away. Get up, ma'am. Stop making a scene. The guards pulled me up. My knees were weak, and my vision began to turn black. Bianca picked up her suitcase and took 2 steps toward the exit.
Bang.
The heavy glass doors were kicked open. Black tactical shields rushed into the terminal, followed by a squad of fully armed CBP special agents. Their rifles immediately locked onto every moving target near the exit. Everyone froze. Bianca's hand went stiff on the suitcase handle. Julian's face turned from arrogant contempt to shock, then to absolute terror. Aiden Brooks, wearing black tactical gear, rushed over to me. When he saw my pale face and the blood on my legs, his pupils shrunk. I pointed weakly at Bianca's suitcase. The suitcase, the makeup powder cases, the hidden compartment. Elena, you're bleeding. It's a miscarriage. Aiden wrapped his tactical jacket around me and lifted me into his arms, his voice deep and urgent. Call an ambulance.
Now.
His men immediately responded on their radios. As Aiden carried me toward the exit, his eyes swept over Bianca and the suitcase. He threw out 2 words. Search it. Thoroughly. Julian finally snapped out of his shock and tried to block him. On what authority? She is our senior customs consultant, executing federal duties when she triggered the alarm. That is our authority, Aiden said, his voice cold as ice. Obstruct us again, and you'll be arrested for federal obstruction of justice. Julian froze, unable to move a muscle as he watched Aiden carry me out of the terminal. In the ambulance, the paramedic tried to stop the bleeding. I clutched Aiden's wrist, my voice barely a whisper. The powder cases, the hidden layer, it smells like blood. I know. We received the intel. Stop talking, save your strength. Aiden pressed his hand over mine, his warm palm transferring heat to my cold skin. The ambulance is almost at the hospital. Hang in there. I looked at the swaying Ford drip above me, my vision blurring. Julian, does he? We will find out if he was involved. Aiden's voice was incredibly steady. Don't think about him right now. Just focus on yourself. Before I lost consciousness, my last thought was, asterisk, thank God I pressed that alarm. Thank God she didn't get that suitcase out. Asterisk. Back in the terminal, Bianca was whispering in disbelief. No. How could she smell it? Her voice was hoarse and broken. She took a step back, then another, until she hit the tactical shield of an agent. 2 agents immediately grabbed her arms, pinning her to the floor. She screamed in panic. You made a mistake. Those are just cosmetic research samples. I have transport permits. Take her in for interrogation. When I woke up in the hospital, the sharp smell of disinfectant filled my nose. I moved my fingers, and Aiden immediately sat up from the chair beside my bed. You're awake? How do you feel? I'll call the doctor. I pulled on his sleeve, my throat burning. He quickly turned around, poured a cup of warm water, and helped me sit up to drink it. The warmth spread down my throat. Only then did I ask in a hoarse voice, the baby? Aiden's hand paused. His eyes softened with deep regret. I'm sorry, Elena. You lost too much blood. The doctor said the fetus was already too weak. I had already guessed the outcome, but hearing it still felt like a physical blow to my chest. I turned my face away, wiping my tears, and asked, what about Bianca? She confessed. She was paid $500,000 by a hostile foreign organization to smuggle a deadly pathogen. She was planning to release it in a highly populated area. Aiden paused. Julian knew nothing about the pathogen. He was just a fool who went to pick her up. He's been waiting outside the room. He says he wants to see you. Get me a lawyer, I said coldly. I want a divorce. Aiden didn't blink. His hand, warm and steady against my cold skin, gave a reassuring squeeze. I'll handle it, Elena. Focus on breathing. Let the doctors do their work. He stepped away, his boots clicking softly against the linoleum floor of the private recovery wing. Through the glass partition of my room, I watched him pull out his government-issued phone. His profile was sharp, outlined by the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway. Beyond him, past the heavy double doors guarded by 2 armed CBP tactical officers, a shadow hovered. It was Julian. Even from this distance, through the sterile haze of the post-operative room, I could recognize the silhouette of the man I had spent 3 years trying to please. His shoulders, usually thrown back with the effortless arrogance of a tenured professor, were hunched. He was clutching a paper cup of stale hospital coffee, pacing the corridor like a caged animal. A nurse entered, her soft-soled shoes squeaking. She checked my vitals, her eyes full of quiet, professional pity. She didn't mention the blood, or the empty space in my womb, or the fact that my medical chart listed my admission under a federal security protocol. She simply adjusted my Ford drip and left a small cup of water on the bedside table. He's been trying to get in for 4 hours, Aiden said as he slid back into the room, his voice a low rumble. The local police wanted to let him through because he's family, but I kept the federal hold active. You don't have to see him, Elena. Not today. Not ever, if you don't want to. I want to see him, I whispered. My voice sounded like dry autumn leaves scraping across concrete. But only with you in the room. And only for 5 minutes. Aiden's brow furrowed, but he nodded. He knew me. He knew that my silence wasn't a sign of surrender. It was the quiet before the storm. I'll bring him in. But the moment you look uncomfortable, he's gone. When the door opened, Julian practically stumbled inside. He looked terrible. His expensive cashmere coat, the one he insisted on wearing to look distinguished for his students, was rumpled. His hair, usually styled to perfection, was messy, and there was a dark bruise forming on his jaw from when the CBP tactical team had detained him at the terminal. Elena! He took a step toward the bed, his hands reaching out automatically, but Aiden stepped into his path, an immovable wall of black nylon and cold authority. Julian stopped, his eyes darting from Aiden to me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, sweaty panic. Elena, thank God you're okay. The airport, it was a nightmare. They dragged me into a holding room. They wouldn't tell me anything. They said it was a national security matter. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. They told me you were hurt. That you. He looked down at the blanket covering my stomach. For a fraction of a second, a genuine flash of horror crossed his face. The baby, he whispered. Is it really? The baby is gone, Julian, I said. My voice was entirely devoid of emotion. I felt detached from my own body, as if I were watching this scene play out from a high, cold vantage point.
Because you pushed me.
Because you cared more about Bianca's luggage than your wife's life. I didn't know, he cried, his voice cracking. He looked around the room, as if searching for an audience to validate his distress. Elena, you have to believe me. I didn't know she was carrying whatever it was. She told me she was doing humanitarian work. She said she needed a ride because her shuttle was canceled. I was just trying to be a decent person. A decent person doesn't tell his wife she's a mentally unstable parasite, I said, my gaze locking onto his. A decent person doesn't mock his deceased mother-in-law to protect an ex-girlfriend. A decent person doesn't leave his bleeding wife on a concrete floor while he walks away with another woman. I was angry. Julian's face flushed red, the old, defensive academic rising to the surface. You triggered a level 1 biohazard alert over a suitcase. Do you have any idea how insane that looked? Anyone would have thought you were having a breakdown. You've been so distant lately, always working late at that desk job. That desk job, Aiden interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, is the only reason half of this city isn't currently dying of hemorrhagic fever. Senior consultant Elena Cole, soon to be Elena Sterling again, is a highly decorated specialist. The desk you think she sits at is a classified screening facility. Julian stared at Aiden, then slowly turned his eyes back to me. The realization was visible, washing over him in slow, agonizing waves. He had spent 3 years belittling my career, calling me a glorified filing clerk and a minimum wage tax burden. To him, my exhaustion was laziness, my late-night calls were administrative busywork, and my secrecy was a lack of ambition. You're a federal agent, he whispered, his voice trembling. For 5 years? But you don't even carry a gun. I don't need a gun, I said. My nose is the weapon. I can smell chemical precursors, synthetic pathogens, and bloodborne viruses before they even register on standard laboratory assays. Bianca was carrying a military-grade strain of a modified filovirus. The perfume she used to mask it had a high-density synthetic binder. I smelled the binding agent, the organic decay of the medium, and the copper of the stabilizing fluid. And you helped her carry it through a crowded international terminal. Julian's knees seemed to give out. He grabbed the back of a visitor's chair to keep from falling. I didn't know, he whimpered. I swear, Elena. I'm a professor of European history. I don't know anything about biological weapons. I missed her. I missed how simple things used to be before we got married. Simple? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. You mean when you could treat women like accessories to your ego? You wanted a quiet, submissive wife who would cook your dinners, fold your laundry, and stay out of the way of your grand academic ambitions. You thought I was stupid, Julian. You thought because I didn't have a PhD, I couldn't comprehend your intellectual world. Elena, please, he begged, taking a step forward despite Aiden's warning glare. We can fix this. I'll get you the best doctors. We can try again. We can have another baby. I'll make it up to you, I swear. Just tell these federal agents to let me go. They're threatening to charge me with conspiracy. They're going to ruin my life. There it was, the core of Julian Cole. Even now, standing in the room where his child had just died, his primary concern was his career, his reputation, and his freedom. He didn't want me. He wanted the problem to go away. Your 5 minutes are up, Aiden said, stepping forward. He placed a heavy hand on Julian's shoulder. Let's go, Professor. Elena, speak to me. Tell him to stop. Julian yelled as Aiden began to guide him toward the door. He turned back, his face distorted with a mixture of fear and growing anger. You can't do this to me. I'm your husband. Everything I have is yours. If you ruin my career, you get nothing. I already have nothing from you, Julian, I said, closing my eyes. The only thing I want from you is my name back. Get out. The door clicked shut, silencing his desperate, muffled protests in the hallway. I lay there in the quiet room, the smell of hospital bleach suddenly overwhelming. I let the tears fall then, hot and silent, soaking into the rough cotton of the pillow. I wept for the baby I would never hold, for the naive girl who had believed a charming professor's promises, and for my mother, whose memory had been dragged through the mud by the man who was supposed to protect me. But as the tears cleared, a cold, hard resolve settled deep in my chest. Julian Cole had spent 3 years trying to make me feel small. Now, he was going to find out exactly how large the shadow of a federal investigation could be. The next 3 days were a blur of sterile routines, legal consultations, and government debriefings. Because of the classified nature of my work, the divorce couldn't be a standard, messy public affair. Marcus Vance, a sharp-eyed attorney recommended by the agency's legal department, sat by my bedside with a tablet, going over the division of assets. "The prenuptial agreement you signed was heavily weighted in his favor, Mrs. Cole," Vance said, his voice clipped and professional. He kept his family's property in upstate New York, his tenure-track savings, and most of the liquid assets, claiming your lack of financial contribution justified it. "I signed whatever he wanted because I didn't care about his money," I said, sipping a cup of broth. "I had my own savings from my early years with the CBP, though I had to keep the source of those funds classified. I deposited them into a blind trust." Vance smiled, a predatory, satisfied expression.
Yes.
"And that blind trust is entirely separate property. Furthermore, the prenuptial agreement has a standard, infidelity and egregious conduct clause. In light of the public assault at the airport, the medical records detailing the miscarriage caused by his physical actions, and his current status as a material witness in a federal terrorism investigation, that prenup is effectively toilet paper." "What can we get?" "Everything," Vance said simply. "The townhouse in the city, his family's lake house, 50% of his future pension, and a punitive settlement that will leave him living in a studio apartment on an adjunct teacher's salary for the next decade. If he fights us, we go public with the airport security footage. Trust me, the university board will drop him faster than a hot stone the second they see him shoving his pregnant wife into a metal barrier while escorting a biological smuggler." "Do it," I said. "Don't leave him a single stone to stand on." "Understood." Vance packed his tablet into his leather briefcase. "I'll file the initial petition this afternoon. Because of the security holds, he won't be able to contact you directly. Any attempt to do so will violate both his bail conditions and a temporary restraining order I am filing concurrently." As Vance left, Aiden walked in, carrying a paper bag that smelled of fresh rosemary, grilled chicken, and real yeast bread, a far cry from the bland hospital food. "I figured you'd be sick of the broth," he said, setting the bag on my overbed table. He was in his civilian clothes now, a simple dark sweater and jeans, which made him look younger, less like a hardened federal agent and more like the quiet, observant friend he had been for the last 5 years. "Thank you," I said, the smell of the food actually making my stomach rumble for the first time in days. "How is the investigation going?" Aiden sat in the armchair beside the bed, his expression growing serious. "Bianca is singing like a canary. Once the high containment team opened that hidden compartment in the makeup cases, they found 3 pressurized vials of the pathogen. It's a synthetic variant of the Marburg virus, engineered to be highly stable in aerosol form. If she had opened that suitcase in a public area, or if she had succeeded in releasing it at her target location, the central transit hub downtown, we would be looking at thousands of deaths within 48 hours. I shuddered, wrapping my arms around myself. "And Julian?" "The FBI and our internal affairs team have grilled him for 36 hours, Aiden said. "He's an idiot, Elena. A textbook useful idiot. Bianca contacted him 3 months ago, playing on his nostalgia, telling him how much she regretted leaving him. She convinced him that she was working on a sensitive, off-the-books medical research project for an international NGO and needed someone she could trust to help her bypass corrupt customs officials who might steal her intellectual property. And he believed her because he wanted to feel like a hero," I murmured. "He always wanted to be the center of a grand, romantic narrative. Helping his brilliant, beautiful ex-girlfriend smuggle revolutionary medicine fit his ego perfectly."
Exactly.
He even gave her his personal university credentials to secure a temporary research visa, which she used to forge her Doctors Without Borders documents, Aiden said, his eyes flashing with disgust. "He didn't know about the virus, but his negligence, his forgery of university sponsorship letters, and his active obstruction of a federal officer, you at the scene are more than enough to put him away for federal conspiracy and reckless endangerment. The U.S. attorney is currently deciding whether to offer him a plea deal or let him go to trial." "Don't let them offer a plea," I said, my voice hardening. "Let him go to trial. Let the world see exactly what he is." Aiden looked at me, his gaze soft but incredibly intense.
"We will.
"We're going to dismantle him, Elena.
Piece by piece."
"He took too much from you." I looked down at my hands. "He took my child, Aiden. He took the only thing I had left of a future I thought I wanted." "You still have a future," Aiden said softly, his hand resting on the edge of the bed, just inches from mine. He didn't push, didn't try to crowd me. He was just there, as he had always been. A different one. A better one. And you don't have to carry the weight of it alone anymore." I looked at his hand, then slowly slid mine over to cover his. The warmth of his skin was the first real comfort I had felt in years. 2 weeks later, I was discharged from the hospital. I didn't return to the townhouse I had shared with Julian. Instead, the agency arranged a secure, high-end apartment in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood near the harbor. The air here smelled of salt, wet stone, and pine. Clean, sharp scents that didn't trigger my hyperosmia-induced headaches. My physical recovery was slow, but my mind was sharper than ever. I spent my mornings working from home, reviewing cargo manifests and passenger profiles for the CBP intelligence unit. My sense of smell was still my primary asset, but my analytical skills were equally formidable. Meanwhile, the storm surrounding Julian was gathering Category 5 strength. It started with a leak. Marcus Vance had played his cards masterfully. He didn't release the airport security footage to the press himself. Instead, he submitted it as evidence in the public divorce filing. Because Julian was a relatively prominent professor at a prestigious state university, the local media regularly crawled the court registries for scandal. They hit the jackpot. Within 24 hours, the headline broke: local university professor detained in airport biohazard crisis. Wife suffers miscarriage after public assault. The article was brutal. It featured a leaked, high-definition still from the security footage showing Julian violently grabbing my wrist while Bianca smirked in the background. It detailed his cruel comments about my mental health and my mother's suicide, which had been captured by the airport terminal's high-fidelity directional microphones. The public reaction was immediate and ferocious. The university's social media pages were flooded with thousands of demands for his immediate termination. Student groups organized protests outside the history department, carrying signs that read "No shelter for abusers" and "Justice for Elena." I watched the news from my quiet apartment, sipping chamomile tea. I felt no joy, only a cold, clinical satisfaction. Then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Elena Sterling. Elena, please don't hang up. It was Julian. His voice was hoarse, trembling, and entirely stripped of the polished resonance he used in his lecture halls. In the background, I could hear the distant, repetitive roar of traffic. He sounded like he was calling from a public payphone or a cheap burner. You're violating a restraining order, Julian, I said, my finger hovering over the record button on my laptop. I don't care. I don't have anything left to lose, he sobbed. They suspended me, Elena, without pay. The dean called me into his office this morning and told me they are initiating tenure revocation proceedings. They're citing moral turpitude. My colleagues won't look me in the eye. My graduate students are refusing to work with me. There are reporters outside my apartment. You did this to yourself, I said. I didn't mean to hurt you, he cried. I was stupid. I was blinded by Bianca. She manipulated me. She used me. She's a monster, Elena. But I'm not. I'm just a man who made a mistake. Please, you have to release a statement. Tell them the miscarriage wasn't my fault. Tell them I didn't push you that hard. Tell them we're working through our marital issues. I will do no such thing, I said. You pushed me. You pushed me knowing I was pregnant, even if you claimed to believe I was faking it. You chose to protect a smuggler over your own family. You deserve every piece of the hell you are currently living in. If you divorce me under these terms, I'll be ruined, his voice shifted, a desperate, ugly threat creeping in. I'll fight you on this, Elena. I'll tell the court you're a government spy. I'll expose your classified asset status to the press. I'll tell everyone that you used your federal power to frame me and Bianca because of your petty jealousy. I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Go ahead, Julian. Try to expose classified operational details of a federal agency. The Department of Justice has a special team that handles espionage and disclosure of state secrets. If you speak a single word of my operational capabilities to the press, you won't be looking at a suspended tenure. You'll be looking at 20 years in a federal maximum security prison with no possibility of parole. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could practically hear his brain trying to compute the sheer, inescapable weight of the trap he had walked into. I'm recording this call, I added softly. Your violation of the restraining order will be delivered to the court within the hour. Enjoy the rest of your day, Julian. I hung up. 5 minutes later, Aiden walked into my apartment, carrying a file folder. He looked at me, noticing the slight flush in my cheeks. Who was on the phone? Julian. He wanted me to save him. Aiden's eyes darkened. He called you? That's a Class A misdemeanor violation of his bail conditions. I'll have the local marshals pick him up by tonight. Let them, I said, leaning back against the cushions. How is Bianca's trial shaping up? She's desperate, Aiden said, opening the folder. Her defense team is trying to claim she was coerced by the foreign organization, but we found a Swiss bank account under her alias with the first installment of the $500,000. She was the architect of the delivery system. The trial is set for next month. The prosecution wants you to testify about the scent detection, how you identified the pathogen. I'll do it, I said. But my testimony will have to be behind closed doors, right? For national security.
Yes.
The courtroom will be cleared, and the record will be sealed. but your words will be the final nail in her coffin. Aiden looked at me, his gaze dropping to my hands, which were no longer trembling. You're getting stronger, Elena. I am, I said. For 3 years, I let him make me believe I was weak. I let him convince me that my sensitivity, the very thing that makes me extraordinary, was a defect, a crazy trait inherited from my mother. But it's not. It's my strength, and I'm going to use it to rebuild my life. Aiden smiled, a genuine, warm expression that reached his eyes. I never doubted you for a second. The day of the final divorce hearing arrived 6 weeks later. Because of the overwhelming evidence of physical abuse, emotional cruelty, and Julian's ongoing involvement in a federal investigation, the judge didn't waste time. Julian sat at the defense table, looking like a ghost of his former self. He had lost weight, his expensive suit hung off his frame, and his hands shook as he scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad. His high-priced lawyer looked thoroughly miserable, knowing he was fighting a losing battle against Marcus Vance. I sat at our table, dressed in a sharp, tailored navy suit. I wore a light, clean citrus perfume, not to mask my senses, but to declare my presence. I looked professional, composed, and entirely out of his reach. Your Honor, Julian's lawyer began, his voice lacking conviction. My client acknowledges that the marriage has broken down irretrievably. However, we believe the division of assets proposed by the plaintiff is excessively punitive.
Dr.
Cole is currently suspended from his academic position, and his future earning potential is severely compromised. Compromised by his own criminal conduct, Your Honor, Marcus Vance interrupted, rising smoothly. We have submitted video evidence, medical records, and the official police report from the airport incident. The defendant's actions directly caused the termination of my client's pregnancy. He showed an utter disregard for her life and safety. Furthermore, his association with a federal smuggling suspect has brought ruinous publicity to his institution, a situation he created entirely through his own negligence. The judge, a formidable woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, looked over her spectacles at Julian. Dr. Cole, do you deny that you pushed your wife at the terminal? Julian swallowed, his eyes darting to the gallery, where several reporters were sitting. I didn't mean to hurt her, Your Honor. It was a chaotic situation. I was trying to de-escalate. You were trying to protect a woman carrying a biological weapon while screaming insults at your pregnant wife, the judge said, her voice dripping with disdain. I have reviewed the security footage. I have also reviewed the audio transcript. Your behavior was not de-escalation. It was a display of shocking cruelty and arrogance. She banged her gavel once, the sound echoing through the courtroom. I find the prenuptial agreement null and void due to egregious misconduct. The plaintiff's proposed division of assets is approved in its entirety. The townhouse in the city, the upstate property, and 70% of the defendant's retirement accounts are awarded to Elena Sterling. Dr. Cole is also ordered to pay punitive damages in the amount of $250,000 for medical expenses and pain and suffering. Julian gasped, his face turning entirely white. Your Honor, that will bankrupt me. I don't have that kind of liquid cash. Then you will sell your remaining personal assets, Dr. Cole, the judge said coldly. Or you will face civil contempt and jail time. This court is adjourned. As the judge rose and exited the courtroom, Julian slumped into his chair, his head in his hands. His lawyer shook his head, packed his papers, and walked away, leaving Julian sitting alone at the table. I stood up, smoothing the front of my jacket. I felt a profound sense of lightness, as if a heavy, suffocating blanket had finally been lifted off my chest. I walked toward the exit, but Julian scrambled up and intercepted me in the center aisle. Aiden immediately stepped forward, but I placed a hand on his arm, signaling him to wait. Elena, Julian whispered, his eyes wild and bloodshot. You've destroyed me. You took my home, my money, my career, everything. Are you happy now? Is this the revenge you wanted? I looked at him, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. He was just a small, pathetic man standing in the wreckage of his own making. I didn't destroy you, Julian, I said, my voice calm and even. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided that my love, my life, and our child were worth less than your vanity. I am simply reclaiming what you stole from me. I loved you, he croaked, a final, desperate lie. No, you didn't, I said. You loved the idea of a wife who was beneath you. But I was never beneath you, Julian. I was just hiding my light, so you wouldn't feel so dark. I'm done hiding. I walked past him, my heels clicking confidently against the marble floor of the courthouse. As we stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight, a crowd of reporters descended on us, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Miss Sterling, how do you feel about the verdict? MS. Sterling, is it true you are a federal agent who stopped a biological attack? Aiden and several security guards cleared a path for us, guiding me toward a waiting black SUV. I didn't answer their questions. I didn't need to. My silence was my final, absolute victory. 3 months later, the dust had finally settled. Bianca Sterling's trial had ended in a closed courtroom. Armed with my detailed sensory testimony, the physical evidence, and her own confession, the federal judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She would spend the rest of her days in a high-security federal facility, far away from the public she had sought to terrorize. Julian Cole's tenure had been officially revoked. He had been forced to sell his luxury car, his expensive watch collection, and his remaining shares to pay the court-ordered damages. He was currently living in a cramped, drafty apartment in a rundown part of the city, working as an hourly online tutor for high school students. The name Julian Cole was forever toxic in the academic community. No university would ever hire him again. I stood on the deck of my new home, the lake house in upstate New York that had once belonged to Julian's family. I had completely remodeled it, tearing down the heavy, dark wood paneling and replacing it with bright, open windows that let in the sunlight and the smell of the pine trees and the fresh water. The air here was beautiful. It smelled of earth, damp moss, wild blueberries, and clean, crisp wind. It was a place of healing. I was back at work, but on my own terms. The CBP had created a new, specialized training program for sensory screening, and I was appointed as the director. I was no longer a secret asset hidden away in a basement. I was a leader, training the next generation of analysts to protect the borders. The screen door slid open behind me, and the scent of fresh coffee, warm cinnamon, and a subtle, familiar hint of cedar and rain drifted out. Aiden walked onto the deck, carrying 2 mugs. He handed one to me, his fingers brushing against mine. He didn't say anything. He just stood beside me, looking out over the calm, blue water of the lake. "It smells perfect today," I said, taking a sip of the warm coffee. "It does," Aiden agreed, his voice soft. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the sunlight. "Are you happy, Elena?" I breathed in the clean, fresh air, feeling the steady beat of my own heart, whole and unbroken. "Yes," I said, a genuine, peaceful smile spreading across my face. "I am."